Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another Brush Sauce theater critique session with Adam Duff here.
Hello, hello, hello.
Now, the theme this month was, let me see, I wrote it a while ago, a month ago, on the actual Discord channel. So if anyone's looking, it's under the Brush Sauce Discord, linked below under the challenge. And I believe the next challenge right here: a sprawling Imperial capital city with a high military presence. Right, simple enough. And I just wrote, think of a multi-tiered city with railways, steam buses, age-old buildings, many districts, just for ideas, and it's just all dwarfed by that industrial presence in the city. So the task is basically to design a scene showing the mood or the atmosphere of the city, whether it's an establishing shot, street scene, etc., etc. And I recommended looking up, artists like Hugh Ferris and Anton Faust and stuff, and just to give the viewers a context of that. I thought I had some examples. Apparently I do not. Is this? Yeah, Hugh Ferris. This type of stuff. Super cool age metropolis style
Mm,
architectural renderings here.
yeah.
Megalithic, really low res. I know, guys. Bear with me. I know the Google just kind of changed how it works with images, but
I do not like how it works now at all.
yeah, that might have something to do with it.
Yeah.
I've been buying a lot more of my reference these days, so I don't even have to deal with Google. Ugh.
Okay.
So we'll go, yeah, top to bottom, left to right, and we'll see if you've captured what I described. So first up
Yes.
would be Sans Rien.
Here we go.
Hello,
Very
film noir
nice.
dystopia. You get it. You get it.
Yeah, look at this. Look at
All
this.
right. So you got a comp here in purple. Well, that I'm highlighting in purple, and with some warm up. Okay.
Okay. Well,
I
right off
think.
the bat, I think one of the things that really grabs me, I love, is that the camera angle takes into account the perspective of the viewer. Like the camera is somebody, so you actually have a shot where you're looking. It's almost like the perspective of a young child looking at the tank going by underneath a structure, which really narratively really sets a nice tone. I really like that.
And to piggyback off what Adam said, I think you have captured the mood here. You've done that successfully. You've captured the atmosphere, and you have captured, you have chose a good angle, appropriate, I think, for this shot. But for me, what it's lacking is that sense of immediacy and drama. And I think since you have so much real estate here, you have this whole big
Hmm.
area that's completely blank. Why not get in there and show the silhouettes, right, of more tanks either surrounding this building, playing up, all around, like all show all kinds of different scale happening here. Maybe show some
Yeah.
characters over here what's, in some kind of like they're surrendering, There's just so much room for storytelling in this piece, and I think it's a bit of a missed opportunity in
Hmm.
that regard. Remember, always ask your scene fundamentally, what is this about? What do you, is this about this building? Is this about these tanks coming up? Is it about the skyscraper style buildings? That's something gravely to kind of consider when designing a scene like this.
Yeah. 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 Actually, to piggyback off of what Tyler said, when you have an open area, it's an invitation, right? If I'm sitting here in the middle of my shot like this, you're looking at me. But if I open myself up like this, now I'm inviting you to check out all my brand new gear, right? But the fact that I moved out of the way it's an opening inviting you. So an opening with nothing there is basically an invitation to nothingness. So be aware of that kind of stuff, right?
Now, just on a few technical sides, we'll make a few critiques regarding the technical side of things here. This is a shape. It's not to say that it is not entirely working or anything. I have no idea what it is. It's almost like just too abstract and there for the sake of being there. I think you could either put more detail there, do something a little bit more with it, and give it a purpose or a function within the context of your scene, and that'll help it. The second technical thing here that I'm noticing is the building is essentially the focal point, right? We're all
Hmm.
looking here, everything's pointing to it, but it has and retains a little bit more of that loose painterly brush work to it, where you have this. It looks like this photo pasted texture of like a circuit board in the background, where things are very crisp, very clear, And even with these, the perspective is just kind of going off in like a few random areas with it. So for me, just because I'm a digital artist and I know the technical side of what is going on here a lot, right? Really clear texture here, photo element here. Probably started as a photo, but it got too rush or loose with the brushwork in here and stuff. So there's a lack of consistency in terms of the overall quality of the image.
Yeah. And I'll just add one last thing, and that's the lighting. Those light fixtures, that blasted out, airbrushed lights that you have in your shot really take away from the detail behind it. And it overpowers a lot of that scene. It might create a nice backdrop for the silhouette of your tank, but it's so blasted out and so fogged out that it's destroying a lot of the information going on in that shot. So you want to take that down. Yeah, you don't have to be that aggressive with the lights.
But nice job. You did a lot of things right there.
Yeah, great effort.
Oh, let me. Computer's hiccuping because we have so much going on.
Well, you have 18,000 windows open?
I do, and I was still uploading from Dropbox.
Oh boy.
All right, Holtz, we'll get your piece going.
Holt Walker. There's the best name I've ever seen in my life. All right. Got a Blade Runner vibe going on here.
Yeah. Nice inspirational sources. That's for sure.
Okay, now I'm going to jump in here.
Take the lead.
Too much information crammed into the same spot. So if we look, for instance, I want to ask myself where the focal point of this shot is. Like Tyler had said in the last one, what is the subject? And I'm imagining it's these ships that are flying through this space. Now, if you look at the midground, the one that Tyler just thinged, and the one in the foreground, notice that you've congested them against buildings that are all of pretty much the same value and color. So they blend in an awkward way into the scene that reduces them as focal points. I'm losing that sense of depth and importance to those ships flying through the scene. And there's so much samey value and color that I can't focus on one thing or another. To my brain, it just interprets it as one big clump of objects all rammed in together without any particular focal point. Okay.
And Adam, on that note, I wanted to say I believe the focal point is intended to be this kind of reactor shape, basically going off in the background, in which as we're seeing all here now, that is the exact problem with it. Adam's a viewer, a typical viewer, as anybody else would be on this image. He totally missed the point. I definitely think, because it's about this Imperial, you have explosions going off with it. It's kind of like back there. That's part of the problem, is that if that's the focal point, this scene is also about all these other things going on. And it's diluting the importance of that, as is the value structure, which, again, this is just an extension of what Adam says. A huge fundamental part of the problem with this image is your value structure. If we look at this and we desaturate it, it's going to, again, feel rather clumsy and disorganized. Desaturate, right? This is all meshing together. It's all dark on light, light on dark, dark on light, light on dark, and then you have this important thing back here, which is light on light, and that's why Adam missed it.
I didn't even see it. Yeah. On
top of that, the other thing that's part of the issue is that you have like a shape like this, and you have these shapes kind of going like this. This is doing that, but you want to maybe shove in the face a little bit more implied direction with how you structure the values to point the viewer to this a little bit more in that regard.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. Now that I see that object in the background, you've kind of framed it with those buildings, which makes a little bit more sense. Yeah, it's right?
framed, which is good.
Yeah. But your values, it was white on white. It's way too overexposed, and we lost that detail. If you're going to point somebody in a direction, you want to make sure that information is clear to the viewer. They know what they're supposed to look at.
And a way to look at this and guide yourself is do a draw out, of your scene. Trace the major areas. So if this is the mid-ground horizon shape, and then that's everything behind it, right? This is all going to be background. Your focal point's going to be here. Draw out the shape. just take the shapes on it, and this is the foreground, right? That's foreground, foreground. This is foreground. Take that, like, assign black, white, and like a mid-tone gray or two. 4 values max, and sort that out. And say, this is all going to be dark, this is all going to be light, this is all going to be light, this is all going to be medium. And make a puzzle of it, an abstract puzzle of it. And if you can get it to read that way, that's a good indication.
Yeah.
But, it's a nice perspective, and, cool draw. The buildings themselves are pretty cool. If anything, though, some of them feel a little on the vanilla side of just pure rectangles with windows. But, yeah, I get what you're going for, and it's definitely a challenging theme this month.
Absolutely. An amazing effort you put into that, too.
Yeah.
I mean, the work is amazing.
I guess we'll do Woody's.
All right. Now that is quite a name.
Yes, Woody Woodworth.
Woody Woodward, of course.
He's progressed this scene quite a lot. He's been working on it in the Hangout, the Brush Sauce Monday Hangout, pushing it up, and we're trying to steer him a little bit better. So he's good. He's taking his reference probably of himself and family members. He's got mood and atmosphere tone. And he's got a new angle with this, which is cool, because now this is about, we can see it's about the cityscape, or not literally, but it's about this more intimate moment inside, which I think is a cool, nice touch. I'm not convinced exactly 100% on the shadows of all these. Because it is, without a 3D model, you are just guessing it, but I'm seeing, based off the light source and things, that I would probably see a little more shadows, something like that. But we'll start off with the nitpick. How do you feel about the narrative and the framing of that in this one, Adam?
Well, narratively, you notice that you left the pathway between the door and the character open. You kind of have that open ground between the two, and what that suggests to the viewer is that that's giving you a timeline. That's letting you know that he just walked in, so to speak. So if you're going to keep that space open to the viewer, what you probably want to do is have that door slightly open to show he just entered into the room and he's presented himself in front of the thing. Because the place, I think one of the things that actually creates a bit of confusion in this shot is the placement of your guards. I would have that guard either more out of the way, have the other guy kind of frame that path between the door and the character a little bit more, or block it out so that the focus is not on the door, it's only on the interaction between the king and your character. That's the first thing I do right there for sure.
And you got me thinking on that. If we look at the geometric space of this room, right, and we break down essentially the perspective of it all, right, the horizon probably be somewhere about there, and if you kind of draw through it, whether we have a vanishing point like here, for example, right, and we're looking at the scale of these characters, it seems like the scale of the characters is fairly inconsistent. Like, I'm not sold. What I'm saying is the distance between this guy being way back here and this guy, like that looks like almost he's like literally in front of him. But I think if we were to slide him back into perspective, put him next to it, he feels like he would be like that big next to him. So there's a scale consistency going on.
Well, that scale consistency has to do with if you think more in terms of cameras and lenses and stuff like that. Yeah. The scale that's the thing that I very often find happens is we're just trying to create drama. So let's say like my webcam has a wider angle lens to take in more of my room. So because it's a wide angle lens, it's going to create more foreground to midground drama. So my hand versus my face, there's a big jump there. But that consistency needs to continue to the background elements. If I have a big jump from foreground to midground, but then there's a compression between the background and myself, that's suggesting two different focal lengths, right? Two different types of lenses. Whereas in your particular case, the consistency between the king and the midground character is more of a neutral focal length, kind of like the human eye, like a 50 millimeter or something like that. And then as we go from there to the background, all of a sudden there's this warp. So you just remain, if you're going to have that warped, dramatic, wide-angle lens type of shot, you want to keep that consistency between foreground, midground, background, if that makes any sense, right?
Yeah, definitely does.
Otherwise, keep that compression consistent. Close, close, close. Flatten your depth of field as if you're using more of a telephoto or something like that.
SketchUp's free. Download it, put a few square blocks in the scene, Go to the camera option, move the slider, and you'll see everything that Adam just mentioned.
You just play with it, and it warps it all for you, right?
And with that said, if you're looking to get, pushing your illustration skills, you're going to have to work on the detail and the design of these characters that are in our face in the foreground. I like starting off with a simple straight, like a teardrop or something, but there's a lack of form in there. There's a lack of design and aesthetics to it. That if you look at any comic character, any game character, any trading this close to the foreground, you're going to have to get a lot more specific about that, about the folds in the guy's clothes, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I think this is the way to think about it, right? Just primitive shapes, but you're going to have to go beyond that to get that, that level of world building that we're essentially referencing.
Yeah. Yeah. I love from an actual fantasy art perspective, though. This really does capture the right mood and ambiance. Something that it's a story and a drawing style that pulls me in. Just those little technical tweaks will make all the difference for you. Really, really nice. Oh, what we got here?
Hey,
a little bit of detail.
This is looking good.
Yeah, no kidding.
Always bringing the thunder.
That's really cool. Now, okay, I would mention a little something here. Before we start to...
I wonder if you'll mention it before I do. Why don't you start?
Well, the perspective, the way this shot was laid out, it looked as if this felt grounded to me. And I didn't realize that this was a, quote, floating city. So there was something about that. I thought it was actually a city sitting in the snow rather than a floating city, so to speak. So I think compositionally it would have been beneficial to see a little bit underneath to show that it's actually elevated off the ground.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. Add a little bit more negative space under. Yeah.
Yeah, I could agree. I think the value structure could be pushed a bit more in terms of seeing these, as a graphic shape. I think will help simplify a lot of your information, right? If we select that, right, and we look at the range of it all, it's all just kind of collecting together, where you don't want to take certain parts of them and you just simplify it overall, using various tools and methods, but just to get them all reading as a graphic shape. Then you can pop your highlight and stuff on the balloon and stuff. But yeah, values, that's sticking out for me. Again, it hits you immediately, like, wow, that's cool because you have a lot going on. When you have a lot going on, though, you got to look you got to sacrifice detail and information for the sake of readability. Like if this is what your scene is about, this whole building area, and like this area where this ship is flying into, which I think is a cool idea. Make it about that. Get your color dodge going. Get your airbrush out, and get those colors just beaming right out of there. Like this, right? The yellows, the greens, the oranges, whatever they may be, right? Get them really popping in there and coming out of this hole. Which leads me to my other comment is like, there was a hint of a light there. There wasn't much. You see a hint of a light there, but like it vastly looks like there's not a single light on in the city, and that's making me question whether that was an afterthought, something that you didn't think of, or it has to do with the storytelling. If it has something to do with the storytelling, you'd probably want to put some kind of greater context into maybe why that's like that. But it feels like a weird, lifeless city as a result, because right, it looks like we have a market here. There's people all over. Ships coming in and out, but it's like there's not a single light on in the whole city. So it's like, huh? What's happening? Yeah.
I would also, just kind of stepping back a bit into the value thing. Remember, there's atmosphere, and between our eye, let's say between the eye and the object that we're looking at, we'll have some humidity, smoke, dust, whatever, depending on whatever the situation is. So objects in the foreground are going to have higher range of contrast. Those blimps up in the foreground should be significantly sharper and darker compared to objects way off in the distance. And if you look, the blimps that are entering into that structure in the middle are considerably darker than the ones that are way up in our face. It should be the opposite. You should have the opposite thing going on. Those blimps in the foreground should really feel like they're up close, and those other ones should feel like there's a lot of atmospheric depth between our eye and that object. Yeah.
All right. little simple value structure thing. But yeah, it's a really cool idea, and I like the design of your
Yeah,
city and your ships. It's just kind of packaging it all together in a
yeah,
really unified and cohesive way.
yeah. It's very immersive. I love it.
Moisten Hendrick.
All right. Very different take on this.
But it's still very much in line with the theme and the
Yeah,
idea.
yeah.
Very cool.
A completely different mind on the same subject. That's really cool. So what
It's
do you
got the
think?
railways, got the military presence, got the industrial city.
Mm-hmm.
Everything we're looking for here. I like these
Mm-hmm.
comps though. Something about these comps, like these original set that you did, that like I
Mm-hmm.
really like this middle one a lot.
Yeah.
I
Huh.
think I think something this has something, I'm not even sure what, that was lost when you took the other one to a final. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's that really dramatic low camera angle. I guess yeah, you went with this one. Maybe if you could, I don't know. I think it's the how that contrast is handled with the character here. It looks like a little more. And I like that this background here in the comp is so soft. It's it feels like the buildings are just dwarfing it, and it's kind of just keep creating this intimate little focus moment on this. There's something about each of these.
Mm-hmm.
When in all honesty, like this one's probably my least favorite. There's something about these two that I like, but I love the tank, and I love that it shows a military presence in this.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like for me, I would have reverse engineered. When I look at a group of thumbnails that I do, I'm like, what do I like from all of them? What do I not
Mm-hmm.
like? I try to combine everything. So I would try to find like I'd make this tank like this train. I'd make it an armored train with like some tank cannons on top of it. That way, I'm combining the good ideas with some of the good ideas that are working on in here. But that again, that's just me, Adam. How do you feel about things?
Well, yeah, the one you looked at, the one with those two, the one with the train on the side, the one that you pointed at.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. Yeah, that little what seems to be a reflection on the ground is suggesting atmosphere. It's suggesting that it just rained or it is raining because you can get that reflection of the light in the ground. I love that. That
Mm-hmm.
touch really adds a lot. Um, yeah, and I tend to agree with you. I think that over cluttering and adding a lot of extra space and detail that doesn't necessarily contribute. It's pulling away from a focal point. It's very establishing, right? That we're pulling away and we're losing a little bit of intimacy with the subject itself. So I think simplification and cropping it in a little bit tighter is what's making it work a little bit better.
Yeah, see, when I start to strip away the detail, the structure's starting to fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you can group a lot of these elements in here, like all of this, this could all be a shape, in an area.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
then you could structure the background however, but it's too much like this is like light surrounded by complete darkness, and as a result it's drawing a lot of unwanted attention to it, where I think that's some of these elements over here that it doesn't quite have that as strongly as this.
Yeah.
The other problem is, depending on ultimately what your goals are with your image making, it looks like in almost too obvious of a way that you did paint it in value and then just quickly overlaid some color, which is
Mm-hmm.
always an obvious thing. If you've looked at a few digital paintings, uh, like you can get a lot. There's a lot of room for subtlety that you could see. Like look at your very reference photos, your examples
Mm-hmm.
here. Look at this. There's so many other subtle colors going on. There's
Mm-hmm.
magentas, there's blues, there's greens. Even in this is a complete monochromatic image. Which again, that's fine if you're going for that, but a lot of this isn't even monochromatic. It's still like just I see shades and tints of black and white, where this is
Yeah.
actually a pure color with a
Mm-hmm.
variety, with it monochromized,
Yeah.
But this is like I'm just seeing too much black and too much white. Like if this is a
Mm-hmm.
tank and it's getting hit with an orange white, well, is that tank originally white? Because that's what it's telling me, that the tank is just pure white and it's getting hit
Mm-hmm.
way out here with like a little bit of an orange light there. So
Yeah.
nothing's actually painted. It's just quickly tinted, and you can see that in here, right? This is a white car, but it's anything but white. It's got the coolness of the night, the blues in it. It's got some of the warmer greens hitting it and getting a lot of those varieties into the colors, and that's why it looks the way it does. So that's something to consider is just a technique. If you want to continue to do black and white value images, for me, I either just start over after I have it planned out, or you're gonna have to like find a system or a work path that works with converting that to color that has a little bit more of that variety and purity in it.
Yeah, and don't forget a black and white image. Very often you'll be doing a black and white image, you apply color and then it gets flat again. Flat colors are better left out. If you're only going to approach something with a single color, you're almost better off not, because you can take an otherwise immersive image and kill it. So if you're going to add color, you have to layer it, add depth, add dimension to it so that it doesn't feel like you just slapped a color filter over it, right?
Right, and once you've been digital painting, like it's pretty obvious when we see these sorts of things, and it's like, oh, as good as an idea is even as good as a value structure is, just kind of like adding color after the fact can ruin it in a certain way.
Yeah. So I'm just going to stop you for a sec, Tyler, but there's a very loud background noise that's almost cutting in. A little trick is, if you're dealing with that a lot, just using a lav mic. You can get like $100 lav mic and just plug it in, and what that does is it just picks up the sounds around your ear. Okay. And it'll cancel out a lot of background issues. Yeah. Well, if you're using a shotgun mic or something, that's what's going to happen, right? It'll pick up all the ambient noise.
Working in a basement, we have some slight basement sound, so bear with us. All right, Kai Stevens, cool. I like your drawing. I like your construction drawing. That we can see that you've really wrestled with working through this.
Yeah.
I think it benefits from that as well.
Yeah.
Few things about this. I mean, I think drawing-wise, the drawing is good.
Yeah.
But in terms of like the narrative and that storytelling moment, for me, some things that are just weird or that just stick out maybe in a way they don't want is the fact that we have this one flag over here indicating a strong sense of wind, right? It's a gust, but all these other ones are flat down.
Yeah,
like,
it's true.
And this isn't a shape or anything else. Like, we don't see over here even, right? This pole, we don't see a pole with other flags just blowing that could build this world and this consistency. It's just like a one-off thing, and since it's red, it's stealing the whole show here.
Yeah.
It's a huge design flaw to an otherwise really good drawing.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only that, but there's a few things I would mention just with regards to that tarp. Paparazzi, their job is to capture awkward moments between a nice pose and another nice pose. There's an awkwardness, and paparazzi live in that moment of transition. When you're doing a shot, when you're using an image reference, if whatever the case you're doing, when you're painting something, realize that even if it's a tarp in movement, you want to capture an elegant moment to that tarp. The abstract shape of it should be pleasing to the eye, and this one kind of is a strangely awkwardly wrapped kind of transitional flap in the wind that feels weird. It doesn't feel, even though it's a painting, it feels like you snapped your picture at the wrong time.
You know what, Adam? Right? I just noticed this seems to be a form like that, and it's going.
Oh, okay.
And again, even in that self, I didn't even see that as part of the image. This is not adding anything to the image, and it makes it feel very, very awkward. Since you have a long composition, and you're just like, I'm going to ride that all the way down. That's more or less a huge tangent, and holding out the composite, like it just is better without it. Drop it. Yeah. Easy enough to drop. The other thing is the sense of characters. Same thing that we were talking about, right, with Woody's. They're all going to this vanishing point, right? Boom.
Right.
Boom. That's like a huge leap of scale between here and here and the characters. I'm not sold at this distance. So again, with the character, like these good characters point. Could be like this big, and for me that would make a lot more sense.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I didn't even spot that. The people off in the distance are definitely a little bit too scaled at that point.
Yeah.
Now here's just with regards to the characters, I'd mentioned this too. Those vanishing points that Tyler just added to the shot, are directional elements. They draw your eye towards this tower, towards this
I know
whatever's
where he's
going on.
going.
You know where I'm going. You've taken your characters, you've taken your guards, you've taken your tarp, you've taken all of this information and you've pushed it off to the side. And what you want to do is you want to bring it back into the middle. And furthermore, if you're going to create a focal point, if you're going to draw everybody's attention to that pathway, reward us with something to look at rather than just space. Because there's no reward to space. We want to be looking towards something.
Yeah.
And remember something else. This is something I learned in editing and videography and stuff like that. No matter what you have going on in your scene, 99% of the time, if there's a face in your scene, that's where your audience is going to look. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So I could have all kinds of hell breaking out loose. You're going to be paying attention to my face the whole time because that's what your brain is designed to look for. So if you have a face, if you only have a couple of faces, don't cram them off into the corner because it's forcing I spent the whole time looking at those guards, right? And they're in a very awkward position. So
we don't know what they're guarding, right?
Yep.
There's like a lack of a payoff. Like you're cutting us off before we're getting to the money shot.
Yep.
So again, like if you drop the characters, even think of this more of an architectural piece. Put something a little bit more interesting back here.
Yeah.
It will be a lot better of a piece served, in my opinion.
Yep. You'd be rewarding us for looking down there, and that's the whole point, right?
Like, you could even put some, like, change the scale up entirely. Make this some kind of park or garden area. You know, where you have, some trees or some shrubs going on. You know, think of that scale. Maybe make a walkway. So, again, these people could, you could change the scale of the stairs a little bit to fit these guys. But establish that scale in the foreground. Mm-hmm. If you're just going to put some, like, people as ornaments, to flesh out the environment.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, cool idea. I like your actual. I like how the buildings are arranged and everything.
Yes, indeed. I second that.
And we have Adrian's back.
Adrian.
How you doing, Adrian?
All right, this is much more. We're just look at this in terms of comparison between what we've been looking at. Most of what we've been looking at in this. Notice how now that we've zoomed in closer to the characters, this is immediately more about the characters, right? And we're much more invested in the performance of the characters rather than the scene itself. Although it's got that wonderful Aliens artistic style that I've learned to recognize in Adrian's work. I really love it.
He's got a sense of his style. It rings strong.
Now you've got a very strong horizon line. Actually, Tyler just silhouetted it.
A few really strong elements.
Yeah, and 99% of what's happening is happening below that horizon line. Now that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I want you to be aware of the choice that you just made and the impact that that's having on the shot. What would happen if we brought something above that horizon line? Would that affect the shot somehow? Right?
Mm-hmm. It's you uniformly kind of like you have like an organization to this that I don't know if it maybe for you, Adam, it sticks out maybe to me a little more than I want to. Like I look at the guys first and everything, but then I can't escape just looking at this huge horizontal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like if you're gonna have a horizontal like that play into the scene, like maybe it should be more subtle, or you should break it apart a little bit because it's such a huge design element, and it's a background element, so it kind of makes it very distracting.
It's very segmented in that sense.
Segmented. That's the right way.
The other thing I would say is, I always like ever since I got into to using cameras and photography and all that kind of stuff, you become more conscious of how you take a shot, right? If this frame was a camera, if I was actually looking through the viewfinder of a camera and I'm looking at this shot, I'm really distanced from it and I haven't really centered the action. It's kind of like I have my action happening over here, but I kind of took a shot of all this. There's a term they use in photography, which is fill the frame with that which you love, right? So if I'm doing a beauty shot of Tyler, I'm not going to have half of a room in the shot. I want to come right up close to Tyler and fill the frame with him. If it's multiple people, if there's an action going on, I fill the frame with that. I don't leave all of that negative space that serves no purpose unless I know in the next shot somebody walks in through the left side of the screen. So you can eliminate all of that and look at how much more rewarding that is.
Framing is everything. I recommend for you, Adrian, like, you're really good and you're creative with your world building, but I don't think it would be a disservice for you at all to do a lot of film and movie studies. Break down the compositions and analyze the heck out of them. You always have such specific and vivid storytelling moments in your scenes, but it's like you've jumped to that without really kind of studying cinematography, compositional storytelling. Go back, learn some of those basics, and then when you return to do your thing, it's going to be way better.
Oh yeah, immediately, day and night, overnight, you're going to see a transition. And pay attention to how different shots, different compositions, close-up, medium, wide, extreme close-up, etc., how that affects the way you feel about that scene. What's happening in the scene when they make a medium shot? What's happening during that close-up? When do they use establishing shots, and how do you feel looking at an establishing shot when everything's zoomed away, right? Pay attention to how that's affecting you emotionally, and that'll help you make more conscious decisions on how you compose your shot, right? Who do we got here?
It's Ravens.
Raven? That's no way. That's the actual name?
Cut your strings before they tighten around your neck. Ooh. Death to the Lords. Propaganda going on here.
Yeah, somebody and you highlighted it well. And
I didn't notice this.
Highlights too.
I didn't notice this honestly until way after because I was looking at these a bit before we started. I just noticed this. This seems like an important subtext.
Yeah.
In your scene, and it's shoved to the bottom corner, and
it's tiny. Yeah.
And it's too tiny. You've got the contrast right that it's light on dark, but everything else, the placement. There's nothing else leading to it. The composition's doing all kinds of things, and it's leaving this out to dry, the side, so to speak. So I think, for me, the biggest problem is the actual drawing and some of that message about this. Like, this is the first thing I looked at, because every line, essentially in this image is pointing to it.
Yeah.
So it begs a question, what is this scene about? Is this about a convoy of missile trucks on a bridge? Or is it about somebody living in this terrible world that can't live with it anymore? Maybe they've been killed or off by something. What is this scene about? I'm getting mixed. And then half your scene, which is framed by everything else, right? The city in the background, is the third thing. So you have three things going on here. And they're fighting for our attention. Some of them are winning, but it's like you got to pick a dominant message that you want to give. You're trying to say too much within a single shot, and it's diluting the importance of all these different elements.
And if you actually pay attention to what the artist wrote, the narrative really is about the human impact of whatever is happening in this shot, right? To me, what I'm feeling is when I read these messages, I see the word abuse and death to the lords and all this, and the talking about the noose around the neck type of idea. The narrative is about that little string-sized character at the bottom of the screen. If you think about the scene, how they introduce that exact same narrative in Witcher 3. At the opening of Witcher 3, the cinematic when Geralt and his partner are riding horses into town, and they see the tree with all the bodies hanging off the tree. That tree is the subject, and it's filling the frame. We want to bring that information up to your audience. You don't want to have to explain in writing what the story is about. That story is a visual story, and you have to present it to people very plainly and close enough so people can observe it. So I would put that character hanging right in front of the shot. I want that person hanging right there so we know, dead body, and then we see the convoy and make the connection, right? But now we see kind of a convoy that's way off in the distance, and I wouldn't even have known that was a hanging character unless Tyler had highlighted
there's
it,
some tangents and there's some other things going on with it, but work on what your image is about, how you can, as we've been talking about in nearly every piece, how you can frame that moment, that subject, that message to make it like almost too obvious sometimes. Better too obvious than not. Like, this is what it's
Completely,
about.
yeah.
Imagine this, just picture this. You have an underpass scene, and you see this body behind one of those nice flashy lights from Wilson's piece, or from Moisten's and Hendrick's piece. You see the body hanging in front of that with the rain coming down, and you see the missile trucks coming up the road on the other lane, and the blood drip. Like, it's all about your framing.
Mm-hmm. John Howe said it. He said, an artist should be held with a restraining order, preventing them from speaking about their work because their art should speak for itself. If you have to explain it, it means there's something wrong, right? So take that into account.
Hey, Tim.
Ooh, a la Final Fantasy type of feel vibe I got going on here.
Okay, I see the smokestacks, and you have a nice style about you. I see your work posted on the forum a lot. But in terms of like what I was specifically looking for, even though this is industrial, it's still like the blue skies, the lack of militarized presence, the big bright green hills. Mm-hmm. I'm all about thinking about outside the box, but this is like missing the mark overall a little bit too much for me.
The narrative is lost, yeah. Yep. You kind of got lost in your own narrative and said, screw the theme. And that professionally, well, that'll cost you a job. Because when you're hired to do that story. And if you don't do that, if you don't deliver what's being asked of you, therein, I don't care how beautiful it is, it's unusable. So I would regard this as beautiful. I love the artistry behind this. But the problem is, one of the challenges of these competitions is you're given a narrative. So you have to illustrate what somebody else has described. That's challenging for artists, but that's the challenge. So you can't allow yourself to just do whatever you want in that regard, because great art, but it's you can't submit it, right? So be aware of that.
And again, okay, so I've broken down the various areas in the shapes of your scene, and it leads me to the same thing. They're kind of nice shapes. The hills themselves are taking up a good amount of real estate in your scene, with the sky playing second, right? Mm-hmm. Second biggest shape in the whole scene, with the third coming to the character in the ground. So there's a hierarchy going on here, and it's like, what is this about? Is this about that sky? Because I'm seeing a ton of it. Or is it about these hills that happen to have little buildings on them occasionally? Mm-hmm. It's like, is it about that city? The city is wedged in between all these points, which is a good, there's pointing to it, but it's so tiny. Yeah. It's so almost inconsequential to the rest of the scene. It's like, what is the idea between this? Is this an industrial city in a canyon? Mm-hmm. Kind of getting that point across, but again, I'd also say there's a lot better ways to show that.
Yeah.
And what is his relationship to this? Is he an inhabitant here? Is he for it all, or is he against it? Imagine if he had a gas mask and he was like hunched over, coughing, struggling to survive in this world. I think a lot of these little elements could be pushed a lot more. Anything to add, Adam?
No, I think artistically it's beautiful, but you kind of lost sight of the narrative, and what Tyler said, just be careful. Prioritize. Size creates priority, right? So like they say, fill the frame. If there's something important, make sure that it's present in your shot. Now we've got something quite nicely worked over here. Thomas Putman.
Hey, Thomas. I hit F. Here it is. Well, look at this.
This is pretty. This is a very pretty drawing.
Now, you designed some shit. You actually, you designed from some point or another. You have a design for this. You have a design for the buildings. You've invented a world in one picture. And in the greatest spirit of this challenge, many of these challenges, nailed it. It was the first thing that comes to my mind. I'm completely bought and sold into your world and setting by this. This is awesome. I could look at this for a while and digest a lot of things. It still has its important focal points, in narrative elements, and they're kind of rightly, staggered throughout the scene. You're using light and form in line to provide us to these things. You're giving us entrances into the painting. You're giving us exits out of it. It's doing so many things right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Would you like to give it any praise or criticisms at this point, Adam? I've said a lot.
I don't know what you're talking. I think this is the worst garbage I've ever seen in my life.
I'm a fan.
It actually started triggering my gag reflex at the moment. I'm totally kidding. I'll tell you, I think this is absolutely beautiful. I mean, I immediately had a very good reaction to it. But here's the thing. When I look at this, I'm totally enraptured by this world you've created. I love the design. I love this design. This is a video game I want to play. This kind of has it's I put that in the same category as kind of like Fable. It's that immersive visually. From a narrative perspective, I'm looking for my eyes are seeking for a bit of a focal point. I was thinking I'm thinking of symbolism, and that bird up on top of that building has an almost kind of like a German Nazi car type of Rolls Royce quality to it. I would highlight that bird on the top of the building to show, because that is quite a focal point. That really falls into that nice third. So having a little bit more contrast, maybe a bit of atmospheric fog or some steam behind it to make that pop, or having the light and contrast around it highlight that building really helps. And that light you have shafting right across the front of that building, I find is a bit of a distraction. It sections off your forms. I would close that and just create a nice silhouette for the shadow coming right across the building and across like that. I think that would definitely serve the narrative a little bit better and help to not break things apart too much. A lot of emphasis is on all of these buildings, and I want one of them in particular to draw my attention. Want one.
I agree, Adam. You could push the contrast on this sucker here, like I was already doing with this. Pushing the contrast, push the contrast. Go a little darker, why not? Haze out, sold.
Yeah. So now we know that even though we have all of this fun stuff going on, now we know that we are heading there to that event. That at least is, exactly. There we go.
Make the importance known. But that said, it's really good though. Besides little tweaks, you're just tweaking and revising. No major restructuring. I'd simplify a few of these forms. Me personally, up top, show a giant, massive super building here or there. I'm trying not to have it make a tangent when any of these other elements, of course, maybe like a little break there or something. Have this go straight up. Sure, why not? Have this simplified, go all up, and just get these shapes a little bit nicer, and it'll be perfect.
I would also add one last little thing. Over on the far right bottom, we have, like you mentioned, we have those exits of our screen, but I don't want them to be focal points. I always want to keep a singular focal point. Yeah, that opening, that archway along the left there. I would have a larger character in the foreground, kind of blocking out that space, so that it's at least we're not drawn to look down there and prioritize that as a narrative point. Again, that draws our attention back to the building, right?
For all of us that missed the mark on people and scale in a big scene, this is an example of it looking pretty good.
Yeah, exactly.
It didn't really cause me to question the sense of depth or anything like that, so that's always a good sign. Great job, Thomas. Probably the best thing,
beautiful.
Probably the best thing I've seen you enter in a challenge. That's really good.
Yeah, no kidding.
Polish it up, make it look fabulous. And see, this is like an example that it is just in tone, like a monochromatic image, and that's fine for what you're going for. It doesn't look like you're trying to pull a black and white piece off as a color one, like like when you see like a colorized black and white photo. It's the same thing, the digital, like just have your foot in one direction or the other.
Yeah.
See, this is an example of that. A little bit, a bit more color is brought into care when he colorized his black and white version. That's what you got to head up, Moisten. But we're almost at the end. 2 left.
Still serving.
This looks great.
Yeah.
This is a nice one. I like it's got like a boat area.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about the city. It's an environment concept piece. I can see you're not going for any kind of narrative and ever. And, if this is your goal, then I think you hit it fine.
Yep.
Like
Yeah.
it sells the environment.
Yeah.
Really nice.
Pretty much exactly what I just said about the last piece, I could say for this one. You have a very clear, definitive focal point of that kind of little boat coming up the aqueduct. And what you've done successfully is that opening above it, where the scaffolding is, you've put a couple of wires. That cancels it out. That brings our eye back to our boat. However, if you look over on the left, you have that other opening in the building, but there's no obstruction visually. And what that does is it kind of creates a secondary focal point. Cancel it. Put something in front. Have something block it in the foreground or even in the background, and that again will draw our attention back to the boat. We see it's there. It creates depth, but it's not pulling us into it. It's the canceling it out would definitely just bring our eyes gently back to the composition. Right?
The saturation of that orange is pretty strong for the area, and maybe that in itself should be framed a little bit more carefully or brought into focus, because it creates a weird diametric between the elements. But besides that, I mean, I think it's a pretty cool scene.
Yeah.
Well thought through overall.
Yeah.
Maybe see a few characters implied somewhere. It feels too barren as a result, especially after looking at Thomas's piece where you could feel the presence. Yeah,
I would mention just as a last note here, there's two kind of perspectives to take. There's environment-centric and character-centric. A character-centric piece, we fill the frame with the character. The environment adds context to the character. Contrary-wise, environment-centric, we have an environment. The characters add context to the environment. So without characters, we have no point of scale, right? So you'd probably want to throw that in.
Oh, hey, Ahmed.
Shafak. Okay.
This is your first challenge. Welcome to the challenge.
I think so, yeah.
I don't recognize the name. Start us off, Adam. I gotta take a sip of water.
Go for it. All right. I think the first illustration we looked at where our background was a little too blasted out, a little bit too overexposed. There's so much fog and glare happening in all that background area, it kind of gets completely canceled out as some kind of a haze, right? So you want to make sure that your forms are a little bit more definitive. You went a little bit too crazy with that, and the light that's hitting the trees, all those trees, the one over on the foreground one on the left, because that value and that saturation and that blast is as strong as that background, it merges them and really flattens the image. We lose that sense of form. So as Tyler was showing you was showing in other examples, where he really makes a point of segmenting and grouping foreground, midground, background with some clear definitive values. That would make all the difference in the shot for sure.
Yeah, the saturation and the amount of bloom happening with this orange in here, it's like so in your face. It's very powerful, and you want, like, just as a black and white image, the studies were better for it, and I think this in and itself would be better with it, because I would say the colors are off the chains and they're just going wild. So work on balancing that out a little bit. So he's very, very bright, and again, think of the shapes and the framing of everything in your scene. Now I look at this, I'd say, okay, maybe it's about this character, but there's nothing particularly framing that character. You have lines wisping that way, lines wisping this way, you have lines wisping this way, you have lines wisping this way, you have, this is a big line, this is a line. This is so chaotic, it's lacking a lot of the structure. Watch the last brush sauce video I'd put out, where it's like drawing simple but bold compositions. This has got your name all over it. Because it's right, look at the shapes of positive, look at the shapes of negative space. This is the center of the comp. It's completely devoid of any kind of info whatsoever. Yeah. So it's like, okay, but a lot of things are also implying that we look somewhere over here. But it's just a point where the tree mixes with the background city. So that design as a composition and whatever message this is about, if it's a park, again, ask yourself, what is this scene about? If it is about a park and about how if it's about the contrast of like these foot soldiers storming kind of through a once nice and peaceful place, make it all about that. We have too much else going on to show that. Imagine having a tree line, but towering skyscrapers polluting the area. These soldiers coming in, ruining, trampling, muddying up this once peaceful, smashed flowers everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
See, like, you could vividly paint the picture before you even set out to draw it, but because I knew exactly what it was about. Find what that focus is on your scene, and it'll probably be a little better for. Now, if it's just an environment shot, again, what is it about in the environment? 50% of it, right? 50% of it is about the park. I drew a line. It apparently didn't keep up. 50% of it is about this background where we see a lone tower, a few rails, and some megacity aspects. So it's like a little bit of a disconnect because it's almost like just 50-50. Whereas, like, if it's about the park, maybe you see hints of other parks back there. Maybe it also just goes from a foreground to a background. There's not really much of a midground here. There's not other towers, going back and supporting this, like, so we could see them in diminishing perspective, playing up. There's nothing that really repeats itself. We have a lone tower, we have a park, and we have a megacity. 3, again, separate kind of entities, not really interacting with each other on a level that it would need to.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is just a shape with a city dropped into it. Look at my very own desktop background here. This is an example of basically doing that really, really well. Paul Chattison's work. You got to carve out shapes and forms on that city to some degree or another without just arbitrarily dropping lights into the shape.
Mm-hmm.
Right, we could see that this is a triangle. It's a rectangle with a pyramid built onto the sides. And we could see that this is like a gasket. Like there's forms to be read here, and that's kind of what you would want to show. This is just it's a shape with lights in it, and it's hard to discern where. Okay, does a building start here? Are they overlapping here? Too many questions. You don't want to have any questions left open.
Yeah. Not only that, if you look at the backdrop way off in the distance, the bloomed out area is actually suggestion of more buildings back there. But you've got those dots suggesting lights are about 100 times the size of these tiny little speck lights in the city. If it's further, it should be smaller, right? So be aware of that, because what you've done is you've put the suggestion of a big scaled building next to small ones. So that kind of creates a bit of an awkward sense of depth there, right? There you go.
Yeah, I'm trying to get out of this.
Got too much shit on your screen.
Yeah, I'm hitting the button and it's not doing anything. It's just doing something on my second monitor. Yeah, see, it's like trying to keep up. Hopefully I'll remember to edit this out. If not, guys, I'm sorry. Technical difficulties.
You're like Ahmed Al-Duri, he just leaves it in. Yeah, that's great.
Right?
Just publish. There you go.
Adam, what's your favorite?
What do you think my favorite is?
Your favorites is going to be Thomas's.
I think, yes, absolutely.
What's my favorite?
It's going to be Thomas's.
Yeah.
Thomas and I think Till as well. I think those are the two. Those to me. Although I like Anton's. That one's really nice too. Mm-hmm. That's a tough one. Although I think in terms of narrative, what do you think kind of nails the narrative a little bit more respectfully?
Woody's has a lot of good narrative going on, and to a degree,
yeah.
I think on the same level even Adrian's does.
Yeah.
On a very similar level. I mean, well, narrative-wise, I really like Ravens, but the rest of it's not supporting the message. So
yeah.
That's what I call a shame.
Yeah.
I don't know. I would technical-wise, I'd put
Thomas is the winner and runner-up.
Maybe like Till's, just as an environment design piece. I don't know. Just because like problems with it, like if I had 10 minutes to fix one of these, I could probably fix this one the best in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So I'll look at it that way. Till runner-up, Thomas being the great contender this month that did an awesome, amazing job. He's got a portfolio piece here, especially if he expands upon it and does some awesome world building.
Right.
Great job, everybody.
Yeah.
And thank you for joining me, Adam.
Yes. This has been a lot of fun. And guys, everybody listening, your quality of your work and the effort is stellar. I did not expect this today. Everybody really stepped up to the challenge, so my hat's off to you guys. Big time.
Again, Adam and
Everybody.
I are both professional art instructors. If you guys need to seek further guidance, we each have awesome YouTube channels, obviously, but we also run private online art mentoring. So
We definitely do, yes. So come and check that out. All
Take
the
care, guys.
information below.
all below. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, we did it. Hopefully there's no
We
problem.
did it!